Welcome everybody to Sex Talk with Natasha. It's Wednesday night here in Wichita, Kansas, 10 p.m. We have a few minutes past. I was running a little bit late tonight due to football practices, all that kind of crazy stuff that's already started.
Wow.
Life is ongoingly nutsy. All right, so tonight we have a little bit of a different format. Oh, and I see my nice little Band-Aid. Isn't that nice? I cut myself really badly making yesterday, so you get to all see my lovely Daffy Duck Band-Aid.
I mean, at least it's Daffy Duck.
Yeah, I mean, it's styling for sure. All right, so tonight we are going to do a little bit different format. We're going to have kind of a general Q&A. So if you are by chance joining us on Facebook or you're a Patreon, make sure you send us your questions because we're kind of just going to take questions tonight. I also wanted to do a segment just kind of like called Sex in the News. And if you like this format, maybe every month or every quarter, we might do a segment like this. I usually get, as a member of ASECT, which is the American Association for Sexual Educators, Therapists, and Counselors, I get to be part of this great listserv, and there's this particular thing that comes out weekly about things that just come out in the news. So different journal articles or things that show up on Huffington Post or the Time magazine or whatever, all over the place, of really interesting stuff that's either being researched or legislation that's affecting different states or the country in general, at least here in the US, international stuff. So I thought it would be kind of fun to go over some of those things with you and kind of see if you're aware of some of these things that are happening on a regular basis. So if you have questions, definitely start bringing those on. I want to just also, before we get started, just tell you a little bit about Sex Talk with Natasha. What I'm hoping that this is a comprehensive sexual education experience for adults. I want it to be an ongoing experience, as I think so many things in our lives are not necessarily one-time events. You don't go to the doctor once, you don't go to the gym once, you kind of do these things on a regular basis to prioritize your health and your well-being. And I see sexuality as no different than that. Most of us have what I call sexual hangups or baggage. I just wrote a book about that called Check Your Baggage, because we grow up in cultures and messaging kind of systems that are fairly sex negative. And that's a pretty universal experience at this point. So I think a lot of us have some work to do as far as figuring out our adult sexuality, exploring ourselves, how we want to negotiate our sexuality with ourselves or with our partners. And that's an ongoing process. So some of us have trauma history, some of us have religious history, some of us have family history issues. We all come from different walks of life, but some of those messages are pretty universal. So that's what we're trying to combat here through education, through resources, through experiential exercises, through daily actions that I provide to subscribers. And I was thinking about the subscriber thing. Money is always kind of an interesting thing to talk about on its own, but to go see a certified sex therapist, it's fairly expensive because that person has a lot of training. So you're typically going to spend somewhere between $100 to $350 is about the range of what a sex therapist will charge for a 1-hour session. And as I was thinking about the subscriber types of formats that we have here at Sex Talk, at the lowest end, you have the $2.99 subscriber per month. So, you're talking about maybe $40 a year, which, would maybe get you into one webinar or one class or one weekend type of one nightly thing that you could maybe attend. And instead you're getting like really kind of almost ongoing resources just at the very low end of our subscriber status. At the very high end of our subscriber status, which is $25 a month, which really gives you access to everything, including online courses, which those in of themselves are, I believe, about $20 a piece or something like that. So that is, when you think about 12 months, I'm really stinky at math, so that's why I'm not an engineer. That's why I'm a therapist. But I'm guessing that's around the $300 to $400 range, that you're going to spend on the subscription. So that would be equivalent to 1 to 2 sessions, with a certified sex therapist. So, and again, not that this is supposed to compete with that, because I think professional help is oftentimes needed. But when you think about the value that you're getting from somebody who is a certified sex therapist, who's offering resources on a regular basis, really almost daily, I just want to point out that I really think it's worth your while. It's very rich, resource rich and experiential rich. And there's also a community that you can be a part of, which as I see people interacting on the community forum, it's neat to see people sharing kind of experiences. And we know that just the fact of sharing your experience with another person who kind of has a similar experience or who validates your experience can be very helpful to the healing process. So I encourage you all to check it out, become a subscriber, and give me feedback as well as far as what you're finding useful, what you want more of, what you want less of. I really want to tailor this as much as I can for the adult audience that is seeking this type of service. And I really want to make it of value for you. So one of the things that we do is Wednesday night, Facebook Live and Patreon Live events, so that normally we invite a guest and have them ask a question that we go into depth in. So tonight is a little bit different than that. But again, that's a really rich resource in of itself, this weekly event. So I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, who's the show's producer, to just give you a little bit more information before we dive into our topics tonight.
Yeah, and thank you, Natasha, for that. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And for those that are just joining the program for the first time, the way we kind of run this, it's an hour-long program. We do it every Wednesday night. And we always post the links too for later. So if you're not able to watch it live, you can always find the resources later on. The first half an hour is free for everybody, especially for those on Facebook. If you want the entire episode, which is the hour long, then you just head over to Patreon. It's patreon.com/sextalkwithnatasha. And that's where you can subscribe to get the full episode along with all of the resources that Natasha was talking about. There's some really great stuff over there. We encourage everybody to go take a look. And we always want to make sure that we're giving you guys what you need. So let us know if you have anything that you're looking for. And the community is great. We have some great patrons who are a part of the community who are commenting and bringing up topics. So we encourage everybody to go take a look at that. If there's anybody that is interested in seeing Natasha professionally, you can go over to her online practice at Symmetry Solutions, and you can find that at symmetrysouls.com. Again, that's symmetrysouls.com.
All right, great. And another thing that I'll just mention really quick, because Patreon in of itself is a bit like Facebook. So if you get on there and look, you're probably going to get tired of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So on the actual website, sextalkwithnatasha.com, Ashley's done a phenomenal job of organizing all of the content so that you can see which daily actions you might be interested in if you're coming in late to the subscription, or you can see where the online courses are available. You can see what blogs have been written, and also the Facebook Live events are all organized by topic, as well as the homework and resources attached to each one. So it's very nicely organized on the sextalkwithnatasha.com page, which will then direct you to the Patreon subscription if there's things there that you're interested in looking at and having access to. So anyway, let's get started. So
yeah.
Sex stuff in the news. So the first thing that I came across was that the FDA has recently approved an app to prevent pregnancy. So this was really interesting to hear, because in a sense, it's an app that is very similar to what I did way back when I was first married, which was the rhythm method, which everybody told me I'd get pregnant on. And I learned it from Catholic nuns in Wichita, Kansas. So isn't that? And I'm telling you, I learned more about my body as a woman from those Catholic nuns than I had from anybody else in my entire life.
Wow.
I got to learn about lubrication and what different types of lubrication during your cycle look like, and whether it's sticky or not sticky. And I'm like, what in the heck is going on? And why did I not know these things about myself? So it was a really interesting experience. So as I was reading through this article, this app, in a sense, is teaching you the rhythm method, and it's called Natural Cycles. And it also includes a thermometer, so you have to actually purchase that along with the app, and it's a $79.99 annual, I guess, charge to be part of this app. So what was interesting as I read through, what were the results and why the FDA would have approved something like this, those who use the app perfectly, so really, you have to, I think, take your temperature every morning, I believe, and possibly even every night. I don't totally remember, but it was definitely something where you had to take your temperature, which I actually did not do as part of my rhythm method technology, which was really just looking at my lubrication. So I did not do temperature part of that as when I was taught, but this is a little bit more, I guess, exact in that way. So 1.8% became pregnant who followed this perfectly. And it was a very large study. Like, I want to say like 15,000 people, if I remember correctly. Now, if they were using it not super appropriately, like they had missed a day or something like that, the failure rate went up to 6.5. Now, that may sound like a lot, but listen to this. Birth control pills is listed at a 9% failure rate. So this app, people who use this app, even not perfectly, had actually a better failure rate. And by failure, we mean you got pregnant than people on birth control pills. Now and just to give it some other context, the IUDs are less than 1%. So those are very effective. And the condom usage is 18% failure rate. So when you put it into that context, and you're pretty good at doing something on a daily basis, 1.8 is not a bad failure rate, and even 6.5 is not bad. So for a lot of reasons, women, there's a lot of women who respond negatively to birth control pills. There's a lot of people who don't enjoy using condoms or other forms of birth control. This is another option out there that you can look into, and it's called Natural Cycles. So that's my news story number one. And Ashley, feel free to interrupt me at any point if we get a question or anything like that, especially in regards to the study that I'm currently talking about.
Yeah.
All right, lo and behold, the next thing that I read was promoting the HPV vaccine does not lead to more teen sex. And this is a survey that was published in the Journal of Pediatrics. I don't know how many people are familiar with the HPV vaccine, but it's been something that's been very much in the news in the last, I would say I've noticed it more in the news like the last 10 to 15 years. There's a new vaccine that has been approved for, I think they start recommending it at about preteen, starting of teenage for children. And so it's gotten a lot of pushback. I remember even when I went to my pediatrician with my daughter and my sons, almost feeling that the pediatrician was kind of like doing this slow startup of trying to be very careful about talking about the HPV vaccine and wanting to make sure I understood that, I guess she didn't want me to think that I was going to accuse her that, my kids were going to have premarital sex or something. And I, of course, was like, look, lady, I'm fine with this stuff, just give me the information and let's get my kids vaccinated. I have no issues with that. But I could tell, especially here in Wichita, Kansas, which tends to be fairly conservative and fairly religious, I think that she was having a lot of pushback from conservative parents not wanting their kids basically vaccinated for something that is considered an STI, a sexually transmitted infection. Because I guess we're still all under the idea that abstinence education works. And of course, my child isn't going to have scary premarital sex with anybody who has HPV. And so they just, that whole concept is just very upsetting for some people. So just to give you some context on that, so 79 million Americans have HPV. It is actually the most common sexually transmitted infection in the United States. From the little that I know about it, it's usually a silent carrier. Lots of people don't know that they're carriers of HPV, so it's asymptomatic for some. 14 million people will get infected each year, in addition to this, almost 80 million people who are already infected. And cervical cancer almost always links back to the human papillovirus. So not everybody who has HPV will develop cervical cancer, but if you do have cervical cancer, more than likely it's due to this virus. And currently, we only have about 37% of girls getting the vaccine and 13% of boys, which I was really shocked about. This is something that both girls and boys need to get. So it's not just girls, yes, girls are the ones who get cervical cancer, but boys are the ones who are giving this to girls, right? So we want to make sure that we're vaccinating everybody. So that's kind of, vaccines in general have had a lot of controversy. I feel like in the last, again, 10 to 20 years, there's been a lot of feelings about vaccines, a lot of different ideas about vaccines. Unfortunately, a lot of speculation from research about vaccines that hasn't really been very helpful for people. And we're noticing really for the first time the return of some diseases that we haven't dealt with in this country for decades because of the lack of vaccination of children. So it's scary in general, kind of some of the information and myths and fears around vaccines. And at the same time, I don't want to be dismissive of concerns. But I will say that I will, everything that I've read and every pediatrician I've talked to and every sexological conference I've gone to definitely encourages the use of the HPV vaccine. So that's kind of our opinion from the expert lens of this. All right. So that's another interesting thing in the news. Oh, and then, so back to the point though of this news story is that I think that there's certain states that do a much better job than other states here in the United States of having programs that educate parents, that promote the vaccine. And so what they did was they studied states who have those programs and states who don't, and then compared sexual behavior of teens. And there has been no increase in sexual behavior in teens where there are in the states where they are promoting the use of this vaccine. Because again, that goes back to the very typical myth of sexual education, that if you educate children or tell them or talk to them about sex, they're going to go have sex. And that's been pretty much debunked in almost every research study that I'm aware of, that actually the more information kids have, the more they understand their bodies, the more they understand about sexuality, actually the more able they are to act responsibly, the less risks they take, and oftentimes the longer they wait to have both penis and vagina and any type of anal sexual encounters. So that's really important to know about educating children. So I'm guessing that's where that study came from, is that trying to debunk that myth. All right, another thing that I came across is a really great article, and I'll just link to it because there's no way I can do it justice, but it was about transgender healthcare. And, it's interesting. I don't know how many people know that when the Affordable Care Act came out under the Obama administration, they made discrimination in healthcare based on gender identity illegal. And that was something new. And, there's been a lot of controversy in this country as to transgender healthcare and whether or not insurance should be covering benefits in that regard, such as things like hormone treatments, sex reassignment surgeries, all different kinds of things that go along with transgender healthcare. So what has happened in the past is oftentimes people will go to different countries to get healthcare because it's a lot cheaper, or they have things available that we don't have available here. And sometimes that goes well, sometimes that goes really, really poorly. What we've noticed is that when Medicaid and Medicare started covering some of these benefits, that of course, more people were getting care, and not only were they getting care on transgender related issues, but also just healthcare in general, right? So if you're motivated to go into the doctor to take care of one thing, you're more than likely going to be taken care of for, your general physical outreach and all of that. So they're getting better healthcare in general. And of course, right now, there's a lot of fears of rollbacks with the Trump administration, and and it's also interesting how, depending on which state you live in, will highly determine what insurance might or might not cover in regards to different treatments again. So what we know, and again, what we know about transgender health is very research-based. We understand best standards of care. We understand that hormone treatment in particular is very important for people to get. This affects mental health, it affects physical health, it affects all kinds of things. And so I just think it's something that it's good for people to be aware of, and especially as they're, paying attention to legislators and things that are happening, just even from a law perspective, it's sexuality and the law have always been very intertwined, because for some reason we like to monitor other people's sexuality through legal ways pretty much throughout our history. So so just be aware of that, and I'm definitely going to link to that, because I think I'm not even doing the article justice. It was very comprehensive and very well written. Okay,
Natasha, could we go back to, we have a question regarding the HPV topic that you brought up. So somebody asked, can or should only teens get the HPV vaccine? And what about recently single midlife?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the areas that I'm not very expert in is STIs. So I will say I do not know the answer to that. I do not know if we haven't received the HPV virus vaccine when we were teens, should we be getting it as adults, especially if you have multiple partners or things of that nature, just like, you would any other birth control method if you have multiple partners, etc. So if anybody knows the answer to that question and wants to weigh in, please feel free to do so. I'm by no means a person that feels like I know everything. So I think, what was the first part of the question again?
You know what, I got off the page, okay, but it was it had to do like, do you have to be like a teen, or can you have it later in life, kind of a thing? Right.
So that's, I know that they start usually at about 11 or 12 to offer it, and I know that especially for I believe it's a 3-part vaccine, so it's not just once. I think you have to go back into the office 3 times to get the entire gist of the vaccine. But I do not know if it's effective for adults to get it as well. I know I've never been offered it, like when I'm thinking about just the last few checkups I've been to. And I don't know if that's because they assume I'm not having sex with other people because I'm married, or if it's just not something they give to adults. I really don't know. So that's a great question. And if nobody answers it in the next whatever, however many more minutes we have, I'll make sure and look that up and post it on the Patreon page. And I'll also make sure that that's just available to anybody, so you don't have to be a subscriber for that answer. Right, anything else?
Well, I was just gonna say, when I was in grad school, I remember, getting checked out, and I don't think I was even offered it, and I was single. And that was in New York, and so I wonder if it is an age thing. I don't know.
How long ago was that?
That was like maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah, that would have definitely been in the time frame, because I just remember really noticing it with my daughter. It was right around the time my daughter was eligible for the vaccine that it seemed to be that it also happened to be in the news, and that was about 8 years ago. It was my daughter's 19 now, I think. So it was about when she was, I think, about 11 or 12, that the doctor said, this is a new vaccine that we're recommending, and here's the reasons why we would recommend it. So good question.
That was a really great question.
Okay. So the last little article I have is, so the birth control ring that you can use for an entire year has been FDA approved. So several things on the birth control front. So it's called Anovera, and it's a reusable version of the Nuva ring. And so how it's different than the Nuva ring, I guess, is it's the same ring versus you have to interchange it all the time. And you insert it into the vagina and leave it in place for 3 weeks, and then remove it for a week, and you can have your period, or you may have a period during that week that it's removed. So it's estrogen based, which for some people, due to certain health conditions, estrogen based birth controls will not be recommended. So you have to obviously talk to your doctor about this. It suppresses ovulation. It has a 2 to 4% failure rate, which again, if you remember some of the failure rates that I talked about earlier, that's fairly good. I didn't see anything listed as far as symptoms. Anytime that there's anything to do with the body, I'm always interested if there's any, especially sexual symptoms, right? So as far as affecting desire or affecting dryness, vaginal dryness, lubrication, if it's affecting whatever, all the many things that can be affected in sexuality, but I didn't see anything in regards to that in this particular article. The ways that they said the reasons why it's a little bit more convenient for people is you don't have to get a monthly prescription. You can get a yearly prescription. You can, again, you don't have to go to the doctor on a regular basis to get it. So, for some of us that have to pick up birth control every month or every 3 months, this gives you a whole year where you just have this one apparatus that you can use. So for those who are interested in looking into that, that's another option that was just approved by the FDA. All right, so that's my sex news for the week, and it coincides pretty much right along with the time that we're saying goodbye to Facebook. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to do next is go into more questions and just kind of, talk to those who are listening to us as far as patrons and stuff like that. So can give me feedback whether or not you liked kind of this update type of session where instead of just having a guest come on, we talk about things that are currently happening in the news. And hopefully we will see you next week. And again, please consider becoming a subscriber and please help me spread the word. We can only provide this service if people use it. And right now we're really trying to build that up so that we can, hopefully be a sustainable entity within a few years. And that's my goal. And I hope that you can help me reach that if you're finding this of value. So any closing thoughts, Ashley, before we take off?
No, just everybody head over to patreon.com/sextalk with Natasha. We're still going on over there. So
all right. Good night, everybody.